Welcome back. Good afternoon to the post-lunch session of the second day of National Skill and Entrepreneurship Innovation Conclave, organized by APEC News Network and hosted by the Labour and Skills Department, Government of Kerala. On the second day, in the inaugural session, we had a perspective from four states, Government of Kerala, Gujarat, Telangana, Orissa, as well as from IIT Kanpur and AICT on how to redefine the startup ecosystem. The second session was on how to leverage collaborative ecosystem for better employment, in which we saw the leaders of higher education institutes across India who participated in that. And now we have got another important session with us, that is employability skills for the future, academia industry partnership. And we all know that how important subject it is, that how to make the youth to equip with a skill which can give them job, which can make them employable, which is a big problem in today's world, especially in the new world order. We all are trying to rescale or reskill ourselves, re-update ourselves for the new world order needs. And it's very important that academy industry partnership happens, keeping in mind the needs of the hour, needs of the new world order. For that, we have got a panel of extremely talented and important stakeholders of the higher education scenario in India. Let me first introduce to all of you Dr. Raghu Raman, Director, Global Rankings and Accreditations, Office of Vice Chancellor, Amrita Vishwa with the people. He'll be playing the role of moderator for this session. We welcome Dr. Raghu Raman.
Thank you, sir.
We're also joined by Dr. K.P. Isaac, Director General, Zion Group of Institutions. We welcome Dr. Isaac. Thanks for joining us. We're also joined by Dr. Sujata Sahi, Vice Chancellor, IIM University. For joining us. We're also joined by Professor Dr. Tabrez Ahmed, Vice Chancellor, GD Goenka University. We welcome Dr. Tabrez. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
We're also joined by Dr. DNS Kumar, Vice Chancellor, Sushant University. We welcome Dr. DNS Kumar as well. Before we hand over the session to Dr. Raghu Raman, let me also take this opportunity to thank our partners for this conclave. The organizer is APEC News Network. Host partner is Labour and Skills Department, Government of Kerala. Principal banking partner, State Bank of India, SBI. State supporting partners, CASE and Kerala ITI. University partner, Amrita. Innovation partner, Big Innovation Center. And supporting partners are Task and VHub of Telangana, as well as ESSI. With this, let me hand over the session to Dr. Raghu Raman. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, and Team APEC News Network for putting together an outstanding event like this, and your kind introduction of all the panelists, giving us an opportunity to share our views on this very important topic, and as you rightly said, a little bit more significance for this event in the light of the pandemic COVID-19. My pranams to distinguished panelists and to all those delegates who are virtually attending this session as well. The gap between academia and industry has always been a challenge that the government, the educational institutions, academic world is trying to bridge. I would say the universities for the last several years and decades have come up with very interesting ideas on startup cells. They have employed manpower to train students in soft skills to make them industry ready. I think every one of us might be following a lot of reports from World Economic Forum and NASSCOM. One such report from NASSCOM says a massive disruption is happening due to emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, IoT, blockchain, cyber physical systems. The report says some of the roles are completely disappearing, the new ones are emerging. In fact, we wouldn't know what are the new roles that are going to be emerging. There is only so much visibility we have. We know that machines will take over some jobs, but there still continues to be some jobs that machine cannot do, and those jobs are actually becoming very higher in value. I think our own government of India says that our India's digital economy could expand enormously from the current $200 billion to as much as $1 trillion by 2025. So with this COVID-19 pandemic changing the way in which we view our world. An increasing number of companies are looking at the option of hybrid workplaces. Today's event is one such example. All of us are remotely logged on from places, and a blend of remote working and working from the office. But against all such backdrop, we still hear that only 50% of our graduates are employable. Maybe this number is debatable, but a large percentage of our graduates are still not employed. And the industry says even after they join the workplace, the employer has to spend sometimes up to even 6 months reskilling them and training them. So this forms the backbone of our discussion today. And the first question, and I would like to share with our distinguished panelists, and what I would request, we would go in a round robin and say we limit our views to about 2 to 3 minutes. And there is about 3 or 4 questions that I have in mind, and the audience would get a good breadth of our answers. And we would start with Dr. Isaac. The question is, what are some top challenges that universities, your particular university, is facing in terms of forging ties with the industry to make their graduates, industry ready? Over to Dr. Isaac.
Thank you, Dr. Raghuraman, for introducing us and welcoming all for the panel discussion on employability industry institute interaction. Thanks for the opportunity given by the Government of Kerala and the AAPC network. So I just would like to start. It's very limited time. That's a major issue which we have to cut short all these issues. See, I just start with a quotation from Theodore Roosevelt, the former president of the US. He once said, "When you play, play hard. When you work, don't play at all. When you play, play hard. When you work, don't play at all." Probably Roosevelt was one of the persons who believed in tough work ethic. He was an overachiever. But today, are we able to separate work and play? Similarly, can we separate institution and industry? This is a question which I wanted to ask. That how far we are able to have a marriage taking place between industries and the institutions. This is a question which we have been debating. Every time we have been debating. Today also we are debating, but we are debating without the persons from the industry. See, the challenges which we face is that we have several schemes which we have it like an industry chair in the institute. We have joint research projects with the industries, the faculty taking up consultancy assignments with the industry, the faculty going and conducting MDPs with the industries, for the industries. The industry personnel are coming and taking classes. All this, still the industries are not satisfied. They still say that there is a gap. So it's a question, and I don't think that the academicians or the academic institutions will not be able to. I strongly believe that we will never be able to, because they are not there today. We will never be able to satisfy the requirements of the industries, because the reason is that what you get from the industries back to the institutes is not that we expect. Though we say that all our students, see, the only profession which I would like to tell is that the medical profession, where the teachers practice. Whether in all the other professions, can we provide a platform wherein the teachers can practice in the industry, maybe 1 hour a day or one with an assigned role. The medical teachers, the professors in the medical colleges have a role to play really in the industry because they practice. Can we envisage a situation like that in all the other colleges, all the other institutions where the teacher, the professor there in the institute is given a role in the industry, a role that is very important. It's not that he goes and visits the industry. I mean, that visit happens, that the professor goes, they go to the industry, that's fine. But what if there is a role for the teacher to play in the industry? The whole scenario could be different. See, so far what we have been trying to do is all cosmetic treatments. Like we have been getting people from the industry to talk to your students, all fine. But this will help the teachers to get a first-hand knowledge, skills, attain all those things in the industry, and can really transform our students to the requirements of this industry. This is what I just wanted to tell you briefly in the beginning of this discussion. I think we will come back later.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Isaac. Over to Dr. Sujata.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank APAC News Network, Government of Kerala, for giving me the opportunity to be part of this important forum. Looking back at 2020, we have realized that it has been a watershed year in the history of people, work, and most importantly, the way we have managed the continuum of our work. This year not only brought about a radical shift across all facets of business and companies, but also made us foresee the kind of skills that are required to accomplish the task. Now, India's economy is also expected to bounce back at a fast pace. Rapid industrialization would require a gross incremental workforce of approx 250 million by 2030. India could emerge as a potential supplier of skilled manpower. But the question comes, which Professor Raghu has raised, that forcing that academician are forcing tie with industry, what kind of challenges we face? Few points already Professor Isaac has mentioned, but I have few points just to add in that. We are not getting on-time feedback from industry to develop and to change our curriculum. We are ready to change. We are flexible to change, but we are not getting on time. Second point I would like to raise here, even we have in our curriculum the structure to have internship, but companies, they're taking very lightly 2 months internship. They are not well trained during 2 months about the kind of jobs and kind of skills are required. We are expecting some kind of PPOs so they can take, they have trained, but they're taking very lightly. It needs to be strengthened. From industry, they can train them according to the requirement of job. Second point, just I would like to add a little bit with which Professor Isaac said, faculty exposure. Okay, few faculty members, they do consultancies, training program, that is not enough. They can take our faculty for 3 months, 4 months to work on a project, join hand with them so they can see green supply. I can give you a simple example, green supply chain management. How do we know? An academician, until unless we go and see and practice that. So my suggestion is like, this is the another challenge which we face, faculty exposure to industry. Although I think we all are academicians sitting here, we do industry academic interface to know the new skills and everything, but in a very miniature level. If our faculty will go to industry, work with them, that will give a great exposure. Another point, faculty, corporate people can be a role model and mentor to our students for developing certain required skill sets. And already we don't know the future jobs and the kind of skills because technology is taking place, automation is taking place. But still, if they can mentor our students and join hand with academician, it will help. Then collaborative research, collaboration with industry is critical for academia to create scientific knowledge about product, new processes, and everything. So accordingly, we can tune our curriculum to impart knowledge. Then creating a research lab. Internationally, you go and find out each corporate has opened a research lab in the premises of universities. We are struggling for that, to open that research lab where our students can practice, do hands-on job along with industry people on a project, so they would be clearly aware about the required skill sets and the kind of jobs are coming and the kind of product company is going to launch. So these are my few challenges which we feel from our side related to industry academia interface. Over to Dr. Raghu.
Thank you so much to Professor Ahmed.
Okay, thank you, APAG News Network. It is really great to have a eminent panel of the speakers in this program with Dr. Raghuram, Dr. KP Isaac, Dr. Sujata, and Dr. DNS Kumar. So it's a great panel, and also topic is very important, that the employability skills for the future, academia and the industry partnership. So the first question asked by our coordinator, this panel chair, Dr. Raghuram, is what are the three important most challenges that academicians face in forging tie with the industry? What I feel that is a very important part, because unless until anybody getting any professional degree, he has to come back to the industry to showcase the potential, competency and performance, and there should be a close link between the industry and academia. But the reality is that there is a kind of two separate groups, that academics feels that the industry will depend on us, and the industry feels that the academia should produce for us. So definitely it is very important that they should meet regularly, they should be synced together, because ultimately the academia is providing the support to industry. Unless until they will understand the need, because I think it is just like the need-based system, that what industry requires, ultimately academia supplies. So unless you understand the need, you cannot supply properly. So then that's why academia should properly understand the market, not the today's market, but future market. Because any course you will do, it will take at least 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and then you go to the market, and you cannot from day one try to drive the market. You will take some time to understand the system, processes, and the products and the market, then you can contribute something. So it is, I think, at least 10 years down the line, we should understand the market. For example, today we see that we are saying that after 20 years, around 70, 80 million jobs will not be there. But we should not be worried, because there will be 150 million new jobs will be there. So there is no challenge for jobs. Now the question is that what kind of jobs are there and what kind of jobs are not there. But still, if you see a lot of academic institutions, they're still running the old curriculum, they're not changing, and they are just go on imparting the degree, and people are very happy they got engineering degree or law degree or medical degree. But ultimately, if you go to the market, we are really relevant. That's why we see that generally we say that we are producing very less employable graduates. So now we have to target that we have to produce 110% employable graduates, because some will graduate, they are relevant, but after a few down the line, they may not be relevant. So that thinking part is very important. So those academia where the academic groups are very active, the vice chancellor is very active, deans are very active, faculty is very active, and they take initiatives, they approach the industry, they have the ties. And also, but sometimes what happens, they may not be in the city area, they may not be metropolitan area, they may be in a kind of village area, local area, where there is very less possibility to kind of the regular kind of interaction with the industry is there. So they have a challenge. And sometimes industry may not be very open to tie hands with all the universities and colleges, because they have very niche products. And also sometimes they have trade secrets. Due to trade secret, due to patent issues, there are a lot of database issues. They may not be always open to that anybody allow and come and then start doing internship, checking the documents, understanding the business, because it may also counterproductive. Because if your competing company will know your trade secrets, they will know about business secrets, you will be lost in the market. So that's why the matter of the trust and confidence is there. That also the matter of the kind of ownership, the kind of the matter of the reliability. So unless until there is a trust building between the industry and academia, the industry may not be willing to support the academia because there's a lot of challenges for leaking the business secrets, patent secrets, trade secrets, and it may also go in the a kind of the unwanted hands. They may also lose their database. So the kind of trust building is required, and it will take time. You cannot develop trust in one day. So those industries who are very old and those academia which are very old and those professors, they have the very known figure in the market, they are able to really tie up and get the benefits. Third point is that because generally if you see the Indian culture, people feel that only government sector can provide the quality education, quality research, and then also even sometimes government supports that funding to only the government groups. But the truth is that if you go to the foreign countries, even Harvard, Cambridge, a lot of universities, in the foreign universities, they are mostly private and they become center of excellence. They are contributing more than the universities. But in India itself, if you see earlier, the picture was that we felt that only government laboratories and government universities will produce the quality and excellence, and the private university cannot provide. But thanks to some private groups, they are really doing well, and sometimes they are doing better than the government sector. And thanks to the government, in the new education policy, government is saying that whether it is central university or if it is a private university or state university or deemed to be university, all are equal. So thanks to the government to understanding the need of the time and also making everybody at par, and then only depending on the quality and performance. So whether you are a professor of a central university or private university, state university, if the laboratory belongs to any deemed university or central university, all are same. So performance matter, the quality matters. So that is a good approach by the government. So what I feel that the first challenge is that the trust and confidence level between the industry academia. Second thing is that because of the location wise, some of the universities and colleges are in the rural areas and they cannot access the big industry, because big industry mostly the corporate office is lying mostly in the big cities. And third thing is that because of the initiative, sometimes you are so comfortable, you feel that you are got everything what you wanted, and there is no benefit to you for your kind of the job, there is no incentive model because you are getting the salary. You don't feel that you should drive the national interest. I feel that these are three important challenges where we are not able to drive the real benefit and sinking the industry and academia. Thank you.
Well, Professor Raghuraman and my other eminent speakers and participants. We heard from my other speakers. Let me put from a different perspective. There's a saying, and I modify it and quote it. If mountain cannot come to Kumar, Kumar has to go to mountain. Having said that, forging the relationship between academia and industry, I see it is going to get forged well with a national education policy. When I say that, how is going to happen before I come to the issues which are there, why the relationship is not getting forged. With the exit policy, which NP has brought, students who will move out after certificate or diploma, and if they want to learn advanced, and when they come back with a live experiences. And that live experiences are going to be challenging task for the academicians to perform. Now coming back, what are the challenges the academic institutions or academicians are facing? Why the relationship is not getting built? Basically, we all coming from a good institutions, and participants who are attending also are from good institutions. We all know the reasons and we have to understand. Number one reason why this relationship is not getting built well is a lack of confidence among the academicians. Lack of confidence when I say reaching to the industry, reaching to the government offices, reaching to the community and trying to understand community issues and problems. We all are getting into the age-old theories and models, and we are dealing with that only. And in the process, we are losing our confidence. At the same time, we have to understand why this confidence is not coming among the academicians. because we know the knowledge, but we don't have the skill and competency. And we have to build that skill and competency. University Grant Commission put some effort to establish, and today we have 69 academic staff colleges. But what deliberation happens there? Nothing related to skill and competency. It is all again the theory, is all another subject. So unless and until professors or the academicians take out the time out of their busy schedule, interact with the friends and relatives who are working in the industry, go to the industry, you may fail once, twice, thrice, 10 times, but there will be a success that comes through the confidence that we are getting generated. And at the same time, it is also not happening because we have a very poor network. As an academician to whom I know most of the people in the academic fraternity. I don't know much of the people in industry, in bureaucracy, or in community, or in NGOs and all. Today, we all have to understand, if we have to bring a disruption in the education, our network should be a net worth. At the same time, we all have established good infrastructure, but intellectual infrastructure, the resources in terms of seed investment for research, sabbatical leave, exchange programs, these are all required. The exposure to the professors is very limited. And why this all is happening? One of the reasons is day in and out, most of the time we are wasting in doing compliances. Today UGC circular, tomorrow AICTE circular, third day government circular. We are into it. Is it building any skill and competency in the area related to maybe management, maybe technology, maybe science? Very limited. So we need to address these issues, and these are the challenges which the academicians are facing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kumar. I just looked at the clock. It is 28 minutes. So we are almost half into our program. So somewhere we will try to see how do we keep that 2-3 minutes limit for each one of them. The next question is, obviously we have students who are coming from school. They do their undergraduation with us. They join a 3-year program, a 4-year program. Some kind of an internship is there, but we still hear from the industry the word, these are fresh graduates, and there can be only so much industry readiness in them. How do we somewhat correct this one? Maybe each one of you can share at least one thing that you are doing within your own institution as a best practice, and that our audience can and take it as a key takeaway. About 2 minutes each, please. Over to Dr. Ahmed, please.
Okay, there are a lot of, I think, success stories about the collaboration with the industry academia, because if you see right now, the national scene in the country, the breakthrough is not coming from the university, it is coming from the industry. But if you see the picture in the foreign universities, any breakthrough is coming mostly from the university, not the industry. So it is totally different condition in our country. That's why we should rely more on the industry, and then we should try to have the joint programs. Okay, for the joint programs, if there are joint programs, in that case we will be directly running the courses. For example, there is a concept called co-designing, co-branding, and co-delivering. In this model, there is a co-designing. In that case, the course is designed jointly with the university and with the industry, and then the course is targeted to particular performance, and then co-delivered, because this is delivered by the professor in the university as well as the experts from the industry, and then co-certified. And once they are co-certified, at least it is helping the student to get the proper recognition in the market. So co-designing, co-branding, co-delivering is the concept, and we are following with a lot of industries. One example is IBM, and also Zebia and other universities we are signing, And also we have 50 foreign collaboration with the foreign universities and taking their academic expertise and trying to deliver the results. Thank you.
Over to you, Dr. Isaac.
Yeah, thank you. So this is something, an area where how each institution is getting the students trained in the industry. See, right now I am with the Xavier Institute of Management and Entrepreneurship, which has 3 campuses, one in Kochi, one in Bangalore, and one in Chennai. See, this being a postgraduate diploma in management course program, we have the students will have to go through an industry summer internship program. But apart from that, that is a must which every institute is doing that as part of the MBA program. But apart from that, what I found here is that they have a program called SUPA, SUPA, which they say is that socially useful and productive activity. Socially useful and productive activity, where they will spend about 2 weeks with an NGO to understand what these NGOs are doing. So, I mean, see, industry, I mean, it is my point here, which I wanted to tell is that industry doesn't mean that it should be a hard industry where something is manufactured. The student can get training in every field of activity, whether it could be an NGO being done, maybe a tourism industry. I mean, that also can be called an industry. So this is an example of how it is being done in science. The second point which I wanted to tell is that as part of every policy of the government of India, which we are promoting startups. And the government of Kerala has an organization called the Kerala Startup Mission. They are also part of this program. So they have, they encourage the entrepreneurs or the people who would like to start entrepreneurship to be part of the startup mission to get their ideas turned into a reality. So in that also the students, because we are very close to the Kerala Startup Mission here in Kochi, the students go and spend time with the startups. This is something which is, they learn it while the startups are, getting their ideas incubated there. So this, I mean, so my point is that we don't have to really look always to a major industry to get your students trained. We have good examples of that, which is followed in XIME to train their students to a great extent to be part of getting them better in their.
Thank you. Thank you. Over to Dr. Kumar.
Well, Professor Raghu, let me give one project which I did and how we engaged the students in the project, and through that engagement, students could map the opportunities they have to get into entrepreneurship mode. And this project was under Industrial Policy and Promotion, Government of India, that is a cluster development. And when I told to Foundry cluster people, there's a grant available to you people to the tune of 60 crore rupees, which is non-refundable. They were surprised. Then we thought, let us do the feasibility report. Now, who should do this feasibility report? If Dr. Kumar has to do, he has to spend 3 to 4 months' time. I sent engineering students, management students, and social science students also to the field. Our first project was in Belgaum, where 130 medium-sized foundries were there. They built a feasibility report. Then again, with the help of the students, we built a detailed project report also. We got sanction from central government. Now, in this process, students could understand what is the market and where the market is available for castings. And you all know, nothing can move on this earth except animals and human beings without gearings. And casting is a supporting industry for bearing industry. Sorry, not gearing, bearing. So you may not believe, in 2004 in Belgaum, we had 130 foundries, and today 217. And the increase which has happened, 18 students who were part of the project have started the foundry. Then we took the help of the government again, and we did another project in Coimbatore and also the Kolhapur. So today, it is not the success story coming from somewhere. We have to create the success story. Now I'll take just half minute how it went as a success. We showed to the foundry people who had not seen properly Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu or Karnataka. We told them, go to the website of Industry and Commerce. There is on the right hand side, there is an icon DGTD, Director General Trade and Development. If you click on that and put a 4-digit or 8-digit excise code number that time, the entire world, what is the market available for your products is available there. And that is how the students started getting motivated. Why can't we, when the market is available, why can't we start the entrepreneurship? So in every area, that kind of success stories we have to create. And that establishes the ecosystem. Thank you so much.
Over to you, Dr. Sujata.
Yeah. So I think most of the points our fellow panelists have already discussed. I'm just telling you two success stories which happened in IILM. IILM has also 2-3 branches in Delhi, NCR, Delhi and Noida. What we did, the first, we have created a project, field project. It's a full form is Field Immersion Leadership Development. Our student went to companies and identified the problem along with company leader, and they worked on the problem and submitted the report. So this one is one kind of understanding. First of all, their recognition to work with the industry, and then during the interaction, they developed certain skills and qualities within themselves to interact with industry, and that the gap which we have required skill sets that we had seen, that was achieved. So this one project we have used, field immersion. So even in beginning of the year. Then the second, what we have, flexible structure of curriculum. In MBA program, last term, we are giving completely flexible to the students. Either they can go for light project, they can work, apart from internship. Internship is one program, and I don't think internship is very hyped or very like, it's just a credit program. But the kind of flexibility in last term we are giving to students, go for live project, work with industry, and then final placement or PPOs, that is the different thing. But that experience to work with industry helped a lot. And another thing which Dr. DNS Kumar has said, probably that social responsibility. We have, this one is also one success story for undergraduate. They went mandatory internship, 2 credits in year 1 to work with NGOs, that they have earned and learned a lot. These are 3 stories which I can share with you. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, talking of social responsibility at Amrita, it is mandatory for all graduating students to spend at least 4 weeks living in a village community, and we make sure that the students from the south goes to the north, and then the north goes to the south. And this has been highly popular, and it has brought in a level of social understanding of the issues and responsibility. And of course, you know, the university is led by a world-renowned humanitarian, and so Mata Amritanandamayi, so she is all for, you know, you do all this work, but what is the use if it is not having any societal impact? And so that is that's a common theme that I was very happy to hear, that, you know, each one of your institutions are also following similar approaches. There is one thing that we have done, and by way of preparing the students for these internships, and we have seen some very good progress. It is mandatory for all students to go for about 4 credits, even up to 6 credits on soft skills at Amrita. This is part of your timetable, and this is not happening right before your placements or anything, and it gets reported in your mark sheets also. You know, there is software skills and there is soft skills or softer skills. So we have placed some tremendous priority and preference to those. And and also we have a huge challenge. We are quite a multidisciplinary university, from engineering, business, Ayurveda, medicine, nursing, pharmacy, dentistry. So there is no one size fits all here. And so this corporate and industry relations center that we have in every one of those campuses has put together a very fine program of introducing this credits for soft skills, and students take it very seriously. And then our placements have been extremely good because of that. And so that is one practice Amrita has been following very religiously. So I'll move over to the next question. There's a lot of talk about skilling, reskilling, upskilling, and in fact the theme of this conference also has that word skill somewhere. As vice chancellors, as heads of your institution, what are some measures, one or two measures that you are taking or you would take to address this, or create this ecosystem for skilling, reskilling? How much visibility do you even have when they say these many million jobs or roles would go away, these would come up again? How do you know? The artificial intelligence is a very broad term. Internet of Things is a very broad term. How do you actually operationalize those? And we would again start with our panelists, and I would request Dr. Sujata to lead the session here. Over to you, madam.
So, thank you, Dr. Raghu. You talked about skilling, reskilling, and creating ecosystem about required skill set. India is also witnessed, and the way Indian economy is growing and we are moving towards, India is also witnessed the growth in education sector also, welcoming the concept of liberal arts, pedagogical changes, mindset of students, and technical integration. Reskilling and upskilling both are required. For that, we need to change our curriculum. We need to add some soft skills. Technically, we are very sound. Like one of my fellow panelists talked about, knowledge, technical knowledge, we are very sound as an academician. But integrating the soft skill in pedagogy, this is required. And the way we teach our students, that needs to be changed completely. It's like a monologue to dialogue and application orientation. Another point for reskilling, we have to change the assessment pattern of our traditional system. What we have in our mind, because of regulatory bodies, we have to go for end-term examination. Can we judge on the basis of retained knowledge? No. Application and practices. So upskilling and reskilling, we can judge only through assessment, continuous. We can judge the student, we can see the student, the way he or she is changing. World Economic Forum, someone has mentioned 10 top skills. We can't teach all 10 top skills as a subject, but we can integrate in our course curriculum. Simple example, negotiation skills. It's like a common. It's not necessary to teach as a paper, but it should be integrated. Emotional intelligence, to lead and direct and work with team. Know yourself, then you will be able to manage others. These are certain skills which can be integrated in our hardcore curriculum. This one is very important. I can mention few skills. Decision-making capability, creative thinking, design thinking. These are certain skills, soft skills, which can be integrated in hardcore curriculum. Then our faculty members, they need to be trained to first train themselves to upskill. I'm not talking about reskilling, still reskilling, upskill themselves through research and through interaction with others, either society or industry, upskill, then they are able to impart knowledge to students. And this is the huge crunch in our Indian academic system. Upskilling of faculty members. Once they they join the university, they remain same. They are not going to upskill themselves, which can be important. So I am taking few example of World Economic Forum, like emotional intelligence, cognitive flexibility. Right now, we are thinking like n number of conferences. Personally, I went on mindfulness. What is mindfulness? It's a cognitive flexibility, and this is not a theory or hardcore course. This is the skill which can be practiced to impart knowledge. So you can handle so many things simultaneously. That is why a student needs an organization to work and manage things, not only contribute with the theoretical knowledge. People management, this is another skill which they can have, they, because nobody can work in silo, they need to work in team and they need to work, manage the team. Then service orientation, these are few points I have taken from World Economic Forum. Coordinating with others, these skills are required, integrated with our curriculum, with our structure. Faculty needs to be trained on this to impart knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And over to Professor Hamid.
Okay. So we have taken various measures to satisfy the requirement of the industry and make the industry ready. So what we do, we have made a committee called C Committee, SEE, Student Engagement and Experience. And then what we have done, we have divided the small groups to the faculty as the mentors. And there is a chief mentor of the school. So chief mentor of the school, they're part of the C Committee and they meet regularly. So we'll understand that how the students are fully engaged and how they're experiencing, to take the timely intervention and to maintain their interest, to make their learning going on. And in this process, when the mentor is talking to the mentees regularly, he will understand and try to match up their skill, flavor, interest to the market ready awareness kind of the job options. For example, if you talk about law, in law, there are 7 options. Somebody can become a litigating lawyer, or he can become a judge, he can join a corporate world as a legal head, or he can join a law firm as an employee, or he can become a law teacher, okay, he can join NGO. So depending on the flavor interest, because somebody is not asking money, he will be very happy when he will be trying to help any poor person or support the environmental protection or an old person. Okay, and he is now a person who is trying to support the human being and will enjoy the entire benefits and he will be very happy, not going for money. But some student, he want to join a kind of the one of from Amachal Mangaldas or Khitan, he want to get very high package from the very beginning and he want to sit in a very lavish corporate office and enjoy the life. So my point is that, and somebody can also become a very good lawyer, somebody can become a very good teacher. So whole idea is that as a mentorship model, the teacher will try to understand from the very beginning which student is having what kind of a skill, what talent, and what is the driving motivation to that student. And then we are trying to send the internship accordingly. For example, somebody want to start an NGO or very happy to support human being or poor or environment, we are sending them to for internships to the NGOs. Once he will get a lot of options for NGOs, and then he can also go and start his own NGO. And how he can start the NGO? We have the center with the when we supported that somebody can forward and he can sponsor, and he will be taught that how to start the kind of the new own business. Same way, somebody want to become the litigating lawyer, then what we can do, we can send him the district court and high court, Supreme Court, and then accordingly, once he will go to different level of the court, he can become one of the good lawyer. Or somebody want to join the civil services, from the very beginning we can guide. My point is that we have to have very strong mentorship model, because mostly the kids are coming up at 12 from the school mindset to the university. Sometimes they are lost and then they are not able to find out. There's so many options are there, which course is good for them, which option is good for them. And that's why the mentorship should be very strong. Faculty should try to handle the student, understand their kind of the talent, their motivation, their flavor, and then guide them internship accordingly. And once we guide the internship accordingly, then what we are doing, we are taking from school wise to university wise and making groups. For example, every school may have a student who want to go to foreign university for higher studies. then we can club all the entire group. Maybe 200 students want to go for higher studies, and these 200 students can be target audience for inviting anybody who is driving the foreign divisions, telling them scholarship, how to write the applications, how to write the recommendation letters, and they can really then get one of the good university in the world on the scholarship basis. Same way, somebody want to go to corporate sector, then he should have very good soft skill. He should be very professional, confident. All these things should be properly trained accordingly. So my point is that industry is very fast changing. Industry, we academicians, we have to have a system and process where we can really match up to ensure that everybody, our motto is that anybody passing from the university must be having a job before going out from the campus. With this motto we are running, and we are trying to ecosystem that everybody is so skillful waiting for him. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Isaac, you have been at multiple institutions in leadership positions. You probably have very diverse experience. If you could share some of those.
See, there are one or two points here which I would like to tell. The first thing is that we have got to get our curriculum updated. See, we have a problem today is that most of the universities are affiliating type of universities, which the new education policy envisages that we will stop the system of affiliation and we will have universities so that they will be able to make the necessary changes in tune with the changes happening in the or the developments happening around the globe. So this is the first point. I think the new education policy, if it is implemented in its right earnest spirit, we will stop our affiliating system, which will be one of the things which probably can pave way to accomplish this task. So this is a very difficult task. Probably it is envisaged that 15 years time. Probably I think we should shorten it, and we will have to put an end to this one. The second point here, which I wanted to tell, is that our academic institutions should have the teaching learning process in such a way that we train our students to be lifelong learners. How can you make our students to be lifelong learners? So that any technology, any new changes which are happening, they will be able to learn it by themselves. Maybe the digital transformation which is happening today will aid them get the information or the knowledge courses that are available, the digital platforms like all our platforms, even Swayam and other Coursera and other platforms. So this is something which we have got to train our students to be really lifelong learners, and our academic curriculum changes in tune with the changes. I'll tell you, for example, at SIME is changing its curriculum in tune with the changes. Even for the management courses, we are adopting design thinking and digital transformation and circular economy. So this is our focus. So that change which we can bring in a very short period of time, whereas in an affiliating structure, it will never happen, because I was in the the founder vice chancellor of the Kerala Technological University. I know the difficulties where you can bring in changes in the curriculum, because which will be opposed by all sorts of people. So we have got to have a university system to be completely revamped in the light of the new education policy, which will pave way so that our students and the faculty will get whatever reskilling, upskilling, whatever is that will happen in a different framework. Thank you.
Over to Professor Kumar, please.
Yeah, well, my co-panelists have said so much. Let me give 2-3 examples. I'll take only 1 minute. Raghu, I'll save some of your time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We have time. We are good on time. You got 5 more minutes.
At Sushant University, recently we got a innovation center established by Bosch from Bangalore. And you all know the boss spends quite a huge amount of money in CSR activities. And they identified, by looking into the profile of our students and our schools, the area in which we are touching, employability skills and entrepreneurship. So that is where we want to bridge. The second initiative that we have taken at Sushant University is, we all know Siemens, and Siemens supplies the machineries to large number of industries across the world. But the problem Siemens was facing was, after manufacturing the machineries, when the industries used to buy the machineries, the operation of those machineries. So then they said, we want to tie up with you, and you have a mechanical engineering program, and we will establish a cloud-based and also the innovation center of Siemens, wherein 30 of your students we will train in the MTech program, BTech program of mechanical. And these are the ready products who can easily operationalize the machines which are there in various industries. That is a second initiative. And the third thing, I was interacting with our placement division and also some of the students. And whenever the corporate people used to come, unfortunately, sometimes they used to ask a question which students are not aware of. Therefore, the success was a bit low. Then I asked the students, can you do a couple of courses which are not there in the in the curriculum or in the program? And one such course that I gave it to them was, every organization knows what is a red ocean strategy. Why can't you do something like blue ocean strategy? An industry which is not doing currently, can it think of doing something different? And that has to come from you young budding managers or the technocrats. And when the industry people started coming for the placement, the students started giving them the new perspective of their managing the business itself. The placement started going well. So this kind of, some initiatives we have taken. These are the indicative, 3 initiatives I would like to bring it to the notice of the audience here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We have about 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes. I just wanted to, probably you have noticed, UGC recently introduced an initiative that brings internships a semester long at the undergraduate level. And we have a very good success story when it comes to internship. I head up the business school, and typically for 2.5 months to 3 months, we send them out for internship. And then we have seen a dramatic change when they come back. So right now we have restructured our curriculum, worked with Board of Studies, which have industry members, and our BA, BCom, BSc, BBA, BCA. And everywhere we have seized this opportunity. Up to 20% of our credits we have converted into internships. Otherwise, as many of you said, we would continue to teach things which are not so relevant, but we have to teach because the curriculum comes from somewhere and we have only so much flexibility. So if you have not had this time to look at this UGC scheme, kindly look at it. It gives you a solid 20 credits, 20% of the total credits of the UG program, even at a BA, BCom level, to send your students out for industry exposure. But of course, it's a challenge to find internships for all those students. I think that that also can be worked on. So we have just about 1 minute, and I think just some key words that I heard from all of my distinguished colleagues. Starting from a teacher role in the industry to practice. Can they go and actually spend time at the industry? Is there any concept of a sabbatical where they go spend time at the industry? And then we talked about, faculty exposure, collaborative research, the trust confidence between the industry and academy. We keep pointing fingers at each other, and somehow how do we bridge that one? And how the national education policy allows for this multiple exit options. And that could be a great impetus for this one. Network building with the industry. A lot of time being spent on conformance. Ask about that. Right now we are going through preparing for our NAC, and the amount of effort that has gone into it. It's an excellent, beautiful experience. The time it takes as well, and then every one of us is bringing that societal sensitiveness in all our graduates, and each one of you very beautifully talked about it. And of course, the 10 top skills that the World Economic Forum. So I think with those, I would think that another one of those discussions, but certainly a new perspectives and excellent a set of speakers here who gave their own feelings for what they are doing in their institutions as leaders of those institutions, bridging this gap. I would sincerely hope the audience would have found it useful. I found it extremely refreshing to hear from my distinguished panelists. So I would like to say thank you so much for each and every one of you to have taken time and joined this panelist. And I would now turn over this whole thing back to Apex Network to take over. Thank you very much.